Murdered Sole Suspect is a game that feels old before its time. Old in a way that's not so much wise, but geriatric. It released on the PlayStation 3 in June 2014, the year in which Destiny also made it into stores, as well as The Last of Us Remastered and Mario Kart 8, just to name a few of the big hitters, more like anvils really. Even independent releases like Outlast made huge splashes in terms of attention that year. Enter stage left, Murdered Sole Suspect, developed by Airtight Games, a studio that closed down a month after the game launched, and published by Square Enix. A game that wouldn't feel out of place in 2007, alongside titles such as The Darkness or even Bioshock. Now, where that doesn't bother me at all, it's easy to see why it just sort of died. And how's that for a pun? In this supernatural mystery, you play Detective Ronan O Connor, or more accurately his ghost, as he tries to catch the infamous Bell Killer. You wander the scary streets of Salem, yes, that Salem, in this stealthy, linear-ish thriller-noir, piecing together your own murder in the space of about 8 hours playtime. That Murdered Sole Suspect had been buried by many games since, and again with the punning, is a shame, because it really is quite different, and put simply, is a great example of a solid B game, like a B movie only with interactivity. And so, I think it deserves a video. To which I say, grab the shovels and bags everyone, because we're going grave digging. So what works in Murdered Sole Suspect? The game has all the right ideas, and there are a generous number of them. Now, because you control a ghost detective, most of your abilities are themed in this way. For example, you can literally jump into the bodies of the living. Once you've possessed them, you'll have a few options from which to choose. Peek, to see what they're looking at, because, you're incorporeal and can't open a book or scroll through a computer. Then there's influence, which allows you to direct a person's thoughts toward a specific topic, and lastly, the ability to read minds. This one specifically is very interesting, and is the most commonly available option. Hearing people's thoughts while in conversation offers a fly-on-the-wall kind of insight and can be incredibly funny, touching, and also quite sad. More so in conjunction with what's being said out loud. I suppose it could be described as adding a codex entry sort of texture to the world, but rather than picking up something to read later, and though there are pick-me-ups in this game as well, these little digestible snapshots meant I couldn't resist possessing everyone in sight. You won't just be chronically spying on people though, you play a ghost, not a peeping Tom. Poltergeist is another of your ghostly abilities. With it you can affect electrical items such as TVs and radios. Also there's Teleport, which does what it says on the tin, and Reveal Remove, which allows you to affect ghost objects to find interesting hidden messages and unlockables. There are also demons roaming about Salem. Think of them as ghosts gone bad, and you can exercise these in stealth sections. Afterlife or no, there are just some folks you don't ever want to bump into. These segments added a little tension to a game otherwise lacking in it. And straightforward as they are, you can still vary it a little by using crows to distract and lure enemies, or avoid detection by leaping through astral residue floating around. And have I made it clear yet just how many neat little moving parts this game has? I'm fairly sure even Casper wasn't this skilled and he could turn into a pillow. Never mind that I haven't even gotten to Ronan's detective abilities yet. This array of mechanics is really quite amusing, such is Murdered Sole Suspect's main strength. The game comes to you in the spirit of vengeance, yes, but also fun. And what's more fun than side quests? Okay, bad example. But in your travels about Salem, you will come across other living impaired people, with most of whom you can only talk, but some of which give you the chance to help them cross over. To do this, you talk with them and investigate how they died, either affirming or shattering their perception of events. Wandering about Salem appears to degrade a spirit's perception of their past lives and deaths. These detours are put to good use and serve as a nice addition to the game's mythology. Now, they also give you a noble reason to nose about, and in doing so, you'll find not just clues for the case, but collectibles. Some offer grim historical context, others insight into the supporting cast of characters and Ronan himself. The most interesting finds unlock ghost stories told by the fictional people of Salem as they recount their strange, supernatural encounters with demons and the dead.
I could feel a shiver run down my spine when the pawnbroker informed me that the wreath wasn't made from rope at all. It was actually made from human hair.
Now I know what they say about quality over quantity, but all these cogs and wheels add to play. By chopping and changing each element to fit your situation, you find yourself doing a little bit of everything throughout your time in Salem. Consider too that the world is more open than purely linear, allowing more space to reveal, mind read and teleport across. Even better are the few opportunities you have to play around with these base mechanics, such as possessing a cat instead of a human to get to those hard-to-reach areas, or distracting people with poltergeist to hitch a ride over an obstacle. If anything, I wish the game fully embraced this and asked you to experiment more with these combos. I wonder how the game would have changed if reframed as a sandbox, perhaps even turning navigation into more of an ability-related puzzle. I found myself wishing I could spook people in their apartments into revealing something new. Having broader possession options available for more living people could have opened up for extra narrative texture, or play opportunities too. Overall though, the foundational blocks are all very much there, and are both inventive and enjoyable, if not stopping just shy of real ingenuity. Whatever the mechanical foundations may be lacking, Salem as a series of levels could make up for. Open in some areas and more contained in others, it has an airy sort of linearity. To explain, levels such as the police station are largely open for you to explore, but to get there, you have to navigate the linear town streets, though there is still some flexibility there. In this area, for example, I can reveal a staircase in the ghost building. Generally, the locations themselves are pretty varied and enjoyable to explore. From asylums and church buildings to creepy old cemeteries and ghostly boatyards, you see quite a lot during your hours with the game. However, what elevates exploration from dull running about is the ghost house rule. You can walk through walls. And hang on a minute, Ronan just got knocked over by a door, and yet he couldn't grab his own gun? I call that a Grand Canyon-sized plot hole. Well, fellow ghost Allison and dead ringer for ghost ships Katie explains that now dead, you see a version of Salem made up of both ghostly remnants of the past, a realm that you have now become a part of, and therefore act as obstacles, as well as the Salem with which Ronan was familiar in life, that offer no such restrictions. However, and this is a very important stipulation, various areas in Salem have also been consecrated by the town's inhabitants over the years, and so, as a person of the spiritual variety, you can't pass through them. It introduces an almost vampire-ish mythology. You can't go prancing into any and all buildings you feel like. What are you, some kind of creep? Once inside, though, you can go absolutely anywhere, which is even creepier, come to think of it. Yes, it's a little bit Dino DNA, but it's also fun to exist in a world with these wonderfully weird barriers. I'm glad Murdered Soul Suspect invents its own internal logic when it could have simply refused to humour any explanation, to excuse the frankly bonkers limitations on the map. Also, this aspect of character movement added some surprising texture to my experience at least. I knew that I could pass through most things that didn't glow like a nightlight, and yet, so often I found myself face to face with a shiny collectible behind a dumpster, a wall, or a fence, and couldn't help but scratch my head trying to work out how I could feasibly reach it when, oh wait, I'm dead. It suddenly makes every film ever made about being a ghost seem more pragmatic. And while we're on the subject of absurd pragmatism, I suppose this is a good time to move on to the story. In Murdered Soul Suspect, you play a hardcore criminal turned detective. Yes, you heard that right. And no, I'm not sure how viable that sort of scenario is in the really real world, but this is a game about ghost realms and cat possession, so Murdered is a B-movie in terms of narrative entertainment value. Things happen in this game that wouldn't look out of place in, say, an episode of Eerie, Indiana, or Supernatural, and it gets away with its talk of witches and the afterlife in the same breath as cops and serial murders by throwing all plot seriousness away at the door. I mean, where did he get another ghost cigarette from when he just threw it up? Oh, never mind. Even the title, Murdered Soul Suspect, is the kind of play on words that raises brows. Not exactly what I would describe as tongue-in-cheek, it jovially marches to the beat of its own drum. As a result, and contrary to what you might think, plot twists, character developments, and ghostly shenanigans sneakily wind up carrying impact. Such is the benefit of a lack of any serious expectation. Several points had me chuckling.
Well, can't you just fly over it?
Fly? I'm a ghost, not a plane.
Others had me on edge, and took me off guard.
I got some bad news.
Don't worry, bro. She already knows.
Now what really anchors this crazy tale, and keeps it from careening too far off the rails, is the central dynamic between protagonist Ronan and supporting character Joy, the teen daughter of a medium who helps the Salem Police Department solve crimes. Joy is perhaps the least annoying angsty teen figure I've seen in a game in a while, partly because while troubled, her motivations are unselfish and made clear from minute one. She's trying to find the whereabouts of her mother Cassandra, and because of Cassandra's demanding job, their relationship is complicated. The, shall we say, gift runs in the family too. So, lacking the proper guidance, Joy hasn't quite found her own way of handling it just yet. Hence, the troubled part. A relatively grounded, if not sympathetic, take on the teen problem child trope. But part of what brings out the best in Joy's character is Ronan. Where she is clumsily attempting to work it all out on her own, Ronan has been there, done that, and got the t-shirt, if that t-shirt was inky and in your skin. Played by Jason Brooks, who's been in everything, from Baywatch and American soap opera Days of Our Lives, to Torchwood and Super 8. He brings so much personality to the character. He has that phlegmy rasp of someone who smokes 10 packs a day, in life and death, as it turns out, to accompany that tone, dripping in dry irony.
What is it with this place? I thought I'd be able to walk through everything.
Brooks brings an old Hollywood kind of quality to this noir-light detective, which works so well with the overall tone of the game's story. His ability to see a little bit of himself in Joy comes across very clearly in the game as well, so their relationship quietly shifts his role from reluctant protagonist to mentor and friend. It also elevates what could have been a pretty empty dynamic into something a little more convincing.
Are you trying to get caught? You're about as stealthy as a tornado.
The desk was like that when we got here.
Yeah, I know.
Ronan could, like Joy, so easily have slipped into an unsympathetic caricature. But in using the supporting cast, Joy, Ronan's lost wife Julia, and Rex, to bring out the best, and in some cases worst, of himself, we get a much more interesting protagonist to play. Ultimately, the game's foundational ideas are all very strong, both in terms of mechanics and story. It may not expand upon these, which is somewhat of a shame, but their presence is effective and satisfying regardless. So, what doesn't work? Besides the slightly annoying way Ronan talks like he has a cigarette clamped between his teeth, even when he doesn't, one of the issues this game has is its niggly little bugs. A chief example would be the subtitles, that I made sure to turn off in the AV menu. Despite saving these settings, every time I exited the game, closed the application and hopped back in, the subs would load up again, and I'd have to go back into the settings to turn them off. Forget ghosts, I was being haunted by the subtitles. And continuing my game in this way also seemed to reset the introductory tutorials, so that when I opened my clues menu, or snuck around a demon for the umpteenth time, the game would feed me the same tutorials I'd already seen at the very start of the game. By no means a deal breaker, but annoying nonetheless. Next up we have the detective elements in the game, and perhaps the biggest issue. Now, the actual act of detecting isn't bad at all. You poke around a crime scene, analysing details that Ronan will store away neatly into the clues menu for you. From there, you can begin to paint a picture of what's going on. You'll know how slick you're being by the badges at the bottom of the screen that act as a sort of grade. Investigating doesn't begin and end with blood splatters and death either. It does extend to side quests and secrets hidden away within the environment that paint entirely different stories. Where things start to get a little ABC is in the smaller details. For example, when you analyse an item or discover a point of interest at the crime scene, shattered glass, for example, and open up this entry in the relevant menu, oftentimes the captions pull a Winnie the Pooh, plainly describing what it is you see. No real embellishments, or Ronan's thoughts, simply, this is broken glass. Not too damning. But when you consider what most of the other collectibles or entries do, add a little something to the story and characters, it feels a little lackluster. More so when you consider there isn't much of a reason to dip back into said menu, and that this simple approach too extends to the actual act of investigation. At certain moments in the story, the information you've gleaned resurfaces, to use in asking certain characters the right questions. These floating selectables range from vague observations like the aforementioned glass, to completely obvious quote-unquote clues, like the bell killer's identity, or location of the body. That said, you aren't so much actively solving mysteries in any challenging way, but simply assembling a puzzle that has only 10 or so pieces, with a really clear picture on it. Funnily enough, by actively engaging with the story, you're working through the mystery as you go. Following along, you tend to make connections long before you're required to do the detective thing in play. Unfortunately, Ronan's plot-related epiphanies come well after you've done all the mental legwork. By the time you've already put the two and two together, he's only just placing the second number in the equation. He tends to come across as one of the world's slowest detectives. Visually, aside from some minor glitches, there's also very little variation, with NPC character models, which tends to take the edge off possession when the same NPC has the same thought as the other NPC with the same face. Then again, maybe I should be a little less obsessed with reading everybody's thoughts. And there are also a lot of ghostly spectres dotted around the world that you'll catch out of the corner of your eye, which largely makes up for it. This one is especially eerie. And I suppose that's a good point on which to end this video, because regardless of the lackluster detective mechanics, setting and tutorial bugs, and basic NPCs that look and sound like basic NPCs, Murdered Soul Suspect still miraculously makes for a good game. For every drawback, there's an upside, no matter how small. It is, spiritually, and no pun intended, a naughty's AA game in all its glory. Plot seriousness be damned, and a whole host of random mechanical elements that exist for no other reason than, why not? He's a ghost, isn't he? The game experiments with imaginatively weird and wonderful ideas and themes and makes no apologies. Now, with that said, that this video resembles more of an autopsy in the wake of Airtight Games' closure than a This Is Your Life retrospective makes me more than a little sad for this brilliantly bonkers B-movie game. And with any luck, this video can help give the game the afterlife it deserves instead. And that pun was deliberate. Not very good, but deliberate. Hello, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to as many comments as I humanly can. Now, without the people on screen right now, this video wouldn't have been made possible, so I want to say a huge thank you to those of you who are supporting me on Patreon. Thank you for your generosity. With a special shout out, or special mention, to Brandon Smith, Bryson Brody, Christopher Cotton, Jacob White, Day Yang, Jessica Costello, Marlon, Michael Smith, aka my dad, Michael Rivera, and That's Lemons. Again, thank you so much for your support. You are keeping me, this channel, and my spirits very much alive. Now, hopefully I will see you all in my next video, which will drop in February, sometime soon, I will let you all know, or on Twitch, where I'll be streaming every weekend. Thanks again, and as always, goodbye for now.